Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Karachi United Football Show. Today, we have a very special guest who is joining us today. He's an avid Liverpool fan who's been a fan for over 25 to 30 years and one of my favorite people to play football with and one of the best players I've also played football with. So, welcome, Humza Khan. How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm good. Thanks, KK, for the intro.
Hello, Humza, how are you?
Good. Hey, Sheikh. How's it going?
Everything's good, everything's good.
So let's dive right into it, Hamza. Hamza, you essentially grew up in a time where football wasn't very popular in Pakistan. Of course, over the last 5 to 10 years, it's grown in popularity. How did your interest for the game develop, and specifically, what made you become a Liverpool fan?
So very interesting. You say that. So I think it all started when I moved very close to the Rahat football ground, which became like our home ground for a very long time. And that's where it all kick-started. So if you remember, I mean, you wouldn't remember, you guys were very little, but cricket was always the dominant sport for us young kids, right? We used to play on the streets all the time. And I grew up playing cricket since I was very little, right? Like played in Gymkhana and played cricket on the street all the time and even through school, more or less. But around 93, 94, I must have been like 15, 16. Football was only played on Fridays, weekends, so Fridays and Saturdays. Initially, it was just played on I think Fridays, and all these Saudi guys who were here, mostly students, etc., used to play football at Rahat, right? So we used to go, when we used to play cricket, we used to go and sit at the ground and watch these guys play. And, football wasn't really a sport like we understood at all, right? Or knew how to play or whatever. And then this friend of mine and myself, like once we went and we wanted to play just for the hell of it. And we ended up like just joining them. And these guys were very skillful, right? So literally people were like they were bigger. And they were so good that we just stood there and we would run after the ball, but we didn't we ran around like headless chickens. And they would keep telling us in their broken English, like, stand here, don't do this, don't do that. And we're like these little Pakistani kids who were like running around, right?
Like, how old were you? Around how old were you at this time?
I think I must have been 15 when I initially just went in to try and play. And then that entire year, I would say that we would, every Friday we would go there and we would want to play, right? But we were I don't know if I could use these words, but we were shit, right? And I mean, it was just like these guys like saw these little kids and they wanted to encourage us, but at the same time they're putting us on the field and we're like kind of like silly and we're not adding value. So anyway, so as things like progressed, like what happened was like what we obviously had to bring something to the table. So I used to start bringing footballs, right? Like really, like I bought a football, like a really nice football. So they would call me in because I had a football. So they'd say, okay, we're playing with this football, so let's also get him to play. And I still remember so, because we're all like, if you're an athlete, you try and do stuff because you're fit and you can run around. And I remember I used to just like try and like hack people, right? Like
you still do, man.
You're a guy who come in with athlete. Yeah, well, at that time it wasn't strategic or it wasn't like planned, right? It was just trying to like tackle someone because the guy would tell me like go and just like these Arabs play really rough football, right? Like they can be pretty intense. But anyway, that's how, long story short, like it started with that. And then as you would know the history of KU, that Taha and the like started playing. Taha at that time I think was playing for a school team, like old grammarians were playing together. And then we merged and we became a team. And then, KU also started around the same time, 96. So 95 we started playing and 96 we registered.
And how did you become a Liverpool supporter?
So interesting. So in 97, I went to Canada. So when I went to Canada to complete my high school, my closest friends were Liverpool fans. So I didn't have a team at that time. I wasn't really like supporting one specific team, right? I started watching football and I was like, okay, and they would just watch Liverpool play at that time, right? And Liverpool wasn't really like I never started supporting Liverpool because Liverpool were winning everything. As you would know, Liverpool weren't really winning much back in the late 90s, etc. But it's just the style of football, the guys that I was watching with, and they were so sort of into the club, the history of the club, and then just the style of football that we were playing. I think Houllier was the coach then. So I picked up Liverpool, and then slowly as I started watching them, I just became like a fan. And then well, I think we'll discuss in detail, but like how much I sort of dedicated to the club itself in terms of watching, in terms of going to Anfield, etc.
So Hammy, prior to Klopp's era, Brendan Rodgers was the manager, and during that era, a lot of pundits and fans actually said that his success was credited down to Suarez and Sturridge and Coutinho. Would you agree with this view, or you have a separate view of this?
Oh, interesting. Uh, KK knows I'm not a very big Brendan fan. Um, I like how we're already deep into the controversial stuff. Man, my view and my criticism of Brendan. Uh, so let's look at the pros, right? I do think that as a young coach coming in, I think that the team that he got, and then the sort of football that he was getting football to play was very attractive football, right? As you know, we should have won that season. Gerrard slipped, and everyone knows the rest. I think I feel like if you look at that season in isolation and the seasons before, yes, he made us play very attractive football, which is why people became Brendan fans and said, we could win it. And maybe if he had won it, things would have been so different. And that's what football is all about, right? Like fans are very fickle. When things are looking up and you give fans hope, then it's like it's a strange thing. But when you get hope, you want to then win, right? Like if you don't have hope, then you manage it and you say, okay, we're kind of like a top four team, and fine, we'll finish in the top four. But for a club like Liverpool, if you haven't won, especially the domestic league, haven't won it for like 25, 26 years, and then you get hope, then you start being like scrutinizing every little detail and you hold the coach accountable. So I do think that maybe I was being a bit too harsh on Brendan, especially that game against Chelsea. I feel, KK and I had like this back and forth on this, right? Like Gerrard slipping. We were talking about the formation, and we were thinking like what Brendan could do, and if there was an experienced coach, how would he play against the Jose team? And if you compare Klopp to Brendan, you will understand that Klopp brings that calmness with the team, understands like how to go and set up against Jose, right? I mean, Jose, when he came into Tottenham recently, if you notice like how Klopp beat Tottenham, knowing what Jose would do. And I feel Brendan was a little inexperienced, and following Brendan's personal lifestyle, I feel he got a lot of fame, and maybe again I'm being overly critical, but I feel like he became too big for himself too early, right? Like he's like, okay, manager of Liverpool, kind of trimmed down, like was going to the gym, So I feel like
he got a
look
new
at Klopp.
wife and he got a new set of teeth as well.
There you go. Okay, obviously knows the tabloid stuff, but I think exactly right. Klopp doesn't have any of that, and nothing has changed. He's this regular guy wearing a hat and wearing a regular thing. But coming back to your question, I think that season, if you really, all of you guys probably remember that season. KK and I definitely do as Liverpool fans. Dude, that season was all about Suarez. He scored about 31 goals, and he scored from everything he touched, like turned into a goal, right? He not only was he involved in scoring goals, but assisting. Like he did carry the team, right? It was also Gerrard's probably like second last season, and I feel Brendan benefited a little bit from like Suarez, Sturridge, and Coutinho playing pretty well. So yeah, I mean, again, you could argue that Brendan, should get all the plaudits as well. But man, I mean, I don't look at just like that season. I look at like his mistake at with Real benching Gerrard, and I think he was playing a second team because he was preparing for Chelsea, and then we lost both games. So that inexperience tells you that okay, he's a good manager. He's a pretty decent manager, British manager, which is why he's always played up. But yeah, man, it's all flop for me. I don't rate Brendan as highly as maybe some other people do.
Yeah, I mean, I think I can echo that. I think inexperience did play its part, definitely. It came a bit too soon for him, I think, that
Yeah.
project and those circumstances as well, But you know, my view, I think that he doesn't get enough credit in terms of the team he put together. I mean, Sturridge was not a world beater. He made him a world beater. I mean, he played his best years under Rodgers. Coutinho was a young guy, very young chap. Got him from Inter Milan, developed him as well. I mean, um, we had Henderson come in who played amazingly well that season as well. These weren't players that were
Uh,
necessarily
e-
known throughout the world of
even
football.
at right back, John Flanagan, if I'm not wrong.
Flano, man, Flano was unbelievable. I mean,
That season, John Flanagan was one of the best right backs in the Premier League. They were saying.
but you're right. I wouldn't put him. I wouldn't necessarily put him in that world class bracket because I just
Yeah.
think he needed more time, more experience. Maybe the Brendan Rodgers now today is a much better Brendan Rodgers than
Man, but
that year.
that's, I mean, you don't give people credit for experience they gain generally by just managing anything, right? So that, I mean, you have to prove that you have the credentials. And my argument to that is that yeah, I mean, he might be a better manager now with the experience, and he was inexperienced at that time. Uh, but again, you have to rate a player or a manager in that time, in the
Yeah.
moment that you find him. I mean, Brendan right now at Leicester has, I mean, he's done relatively okay. Yeah, Leicester is in the top four, and we always felt that Brendan is a good enough manager to be in the well, I don't know, elite, if you may, like all over Europe, but definitely in England, right? But Eddie Howe's there. He hasn't been tested. He's a pretty good manager. I think I would put Brendan in that category, maybe slightly better. But what I want to touch upon, which you guys would know because you guys are coaches and you understand this, is about balance, right? And Brendan, if you notice, even with Leicester, he likes this attacking football, and the mindset is attacking football. But if you don't have the right balance between attack and defense, then you're not going to win the league. You could win cup competitions. You could do really well in games where you're scoring 4 goals. Brendan's teams were scoring a lot of goals, but they were conceding a lot of goals as well. And again, the argument could be, poor defenders and an average keeper, which Klopp addressed. But Brendan should have addressed that as well, right? I mean, for a manager like Klopp in the last season, most games we won are like what, by 1 goal margin or 1-0, and we didn't have that stress at Klopp's time that we did at Brendan's time, right? Where a ball comes into the box and then we're going to score a goal. Now you can
But
say, well, we didn't have a great defender, we didn't have Van Dijk at that time, we didn't have Alisson. Then, I mean, you had the money, you could have gone and bought whoever you wanted to buy, right?
So Hamza,
Hammy,
you've sorry, go
yeah,
on.
my point was even in Klopp's first 2 3 seasons, the team was pretty similar in terms of scoring a lot of goals, but conceding again 4-3s, a lot of 4-3 wins, 3-2s. I feel it was the last season that actually he felt he'd got a complete team. Maybe if Brendan had given this much time as Klopp has had, it would have been a different story in terms of addressing the defensive issues and all of the failures in defense and midfield.
Man,
So
I don't agree. I don't agree, Sheikh. You know why? Because Brendan's team was on the decline. If you think about it, it was just that one season, and then we finished what we got like 3.5 years, right? His team was on the decline, as opposed to Klopp's team that actually was ascending, right? Like it was doing better every year. Like he inherited a team. I think we finished fourth that season, just about,
That's right.
or the next season, and then it was just about improving on that, right? Look at last year; we should have won it last year. 97 points, man. No team has come second with 97 points. 97 going against a team like Man City, right? And then this season, we technically in any other sort of setting, we would have won it last year, and we would have won it this year by like 30 points. You can't compare that to Brendan. You can't compare that to anyone, dude. There's no comparison between Klopp and Brendan
So
at all. I'm sorry. You
so
could compare Brendan to Eddie Howe. If you talk about that, then I'm happy to entertain this.
so Hamza,
Come
just
on, guys.
going off this Klopp bandwagon and all that, it kind of gives me a good segue into the next question. Jurgen Klopp has got plenty of praise, in the last 4 years, even in his time at Dortmund. What are some of the mistakes you think he's made during his time at Liverpool, if any?
Ooh.
Ooh,
Man,
googly,
I don't
googly.
think that, yeah. So, yeah, I think definitely, as you guys would agree, I think that if I were to at all be critical of Klopp, is that he is a stubborn guy. If you notice, like there are pros and cons of certain things like that Klopp does, right? One, like he's the sort of guy who would, for example, if we were playing in Klopp's team and we made mistakes, Klopp would continue to play us. He's not very harsh with players who are positive and want to play. And if they make mistakes, Klopp owns those mistakes. For example, continuously playing Lovren. I don't know what the hell Lovren is still doing in Liverpool, but he's still there and he's still playing football, right? And it's just like it irks, and it but with so much success you can't say much, because if, for example, Liverpool weren't doing well, trust me, fans would be on his case, right? So obviously winning changes everything, right? If you're winning by 30 points or 25 points, people are not going to criticize, or they don't have much to criticize. The other thing is that if you notice, like there are certain decisions he took, even like, I mean, signing maybe Allison and Van Dijk were a year late. And yes, I know signings have other complications around it at the back, but the stubbornness does play out. Like he does persist with certain players. I feel, whereas some other managers would be like, okay, this guy is crap. Let's get rid of him. Let's bring in someone else, especially when you have the money. So money was available. But that's what I also like about Klopp. He doesn't have a knee-jerk reaction to players. He does believe in giving them time. Mignolet was given time. I mean, Gary has played the final, right? And Klopp came out still defended him after the howlers. So if I were to like just talk about high level, just talk about like criticism, then I would say this plays out across the board. Like with his substitutions, if you notice, he doesn't really sub players. He keeps them. He waits till like the 70th, 75th minute, 80th minute to substitute players, and he really gets a lot out of these players, out of the team. I don't know if that is sustainable, right? We've been very lucky with players not getting injured, so Klopp has to get credit. Imagine if Firmino, Salah, or Mane missed like half season, like some of the other clubs, like Pogba's been out. Other teams
De
have
Bruyne
missed players.
had
I
a lot
don't
of
know
injuries
how.
throughout the season.
Right, and our players have been like our main players have been able to play consistently. So yeah, I mean, I guess a little bit of luck on that part does luck does play a part, I guess, in
I think, Hamza, if
getting.
I can add, it's a bit of a double-edged sword situation, because the fact that he persists with some players, he doesn't sub them, he will keep giving Lovren a chance and Mignolet a chance, it kind of feeds into the rest of the group, and they start thinking, you know what, it's a culture and an environment where I can make mistakes, I can fail, but I'll still have my place. So to have that balance of ruthlessness and also like a family environment where a safe space where you can make mistakes and you can still be in the team, I think that's has been critical to the success, maybe not of Lovren, but maybe of Matip or maybe of, you know, Robbo, because they're witnessing that and saying, you know what, it's okay if I make those errors, I'll still be able to keep my space, keep my place.
I
But yeah,
think generally the team culture, I feel the team culture has improved a lot, because one of those reasons is he sticks with his players. So the players generally do feel the confidence of the manager, of the coaching staff, and they're not afraid to make mistakes. So I think that's something very big, even with our experience as well. At times when players are very scared, they don't perform to their full potential, and I think that plays into Liverpool's
Man,
game.
I agree, but I do slightly disagree. Like I think football, it's more complicated than that, because it's about management style, right? And I like his management style. Let me put it out there. But imagine the same approach is not like Klopp is not the only one who has that approach. There are clubs that are maybe in the relegation zone where managers stick to players even though they don't perform well. But you see, I mean, if we weren't winning, then you would criticize all these things, right? Like I said, that he's found the winning formula, and yes, this plays into, like you said, like for the likes of Rob or Lalana or whoever, like players who want that confidence. Yes, it feeds into that confidence. But if you were losing games, things would have been very different, right? Because you could counter this point by saying that you want to keep that competitiveness level where if you're good enough, you can play. If you're not good enough, you're out, right? So the best want to then perform. Sometimes complacency can also come in. Is like, yeah, you take the pressure off the players, but then, I mean, Lovren, like, I mean, you remember the Watford game, right? Like it was
yeah.
horrendous, and he continues to do that. And yes, we lost that one game, and yeah, we're not the Invincibles and whatever. But I feel like that hasn't really helped Lovren in any way. Like, it's not like Lovren's all of a sudden playing better football. So I would just, like, we should have bought a defender maybe in January, or address this issue earlier. But again, like, I think the injuries have worked in our favor. Even though Matip has been out for most of the season, Gomez has come in and played really well, and he's really stepped up. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that we've lucked out a little bit, and
Absolutely, Hami. That's a great point. I think it's a very, very complicated balance to strike, and every case is different,
yeah,
and it's hard for us to generalize it. I think he has to see the player's
Oh yeah,
personality, the situation,
yeah,
etc.
yeah,
well, I would take Hammy's point a little further, but I think I do agree to his point a little bit. I think with the balance that you're talking about, Kili, in terms of Karius and Minile, he felt that these were the starting goalkeepers, and where he felt that starting 11 or the starting players weren't up to the standards, he got rid of all of them. Maybe he's taking Lovren as part of someone who's beneficial for the team in terms of his leadership, in terms of his so I think I would take Hamza's point a little further, and I do agree to a certain extent. I think if you see the goalkeepers that he had, Minale and Karius, they were the starting goalkeepers, and the moment certainly kept hold of them is maybe because of the leadership and the experience that they give to the squad, and this was one of the reasons why Van Dijk was brought.
yeah. So I was saying, just to add to that, as you were speaking, Sheikh, I think you're right, absolutely spot on. You
Start
see,
with, yeah,
Klopp, Klopp is all about looking at the unit itself, right? He doesn't individually focus on players like, oh, Lovren's playing. He'll get a unit that's going to play on that day. And he's just got this mentality, like, inculcated in all these players, that we need to win, like, that at all costs, right? And he brings the unit
yeah,
together, like you said, as a family. Even when Klopp will make a mistake or sorry, Lovren would make a mistake that is just individually, just an individual mistake. Klopp will never pick that out. He will say, what was the build-up that led to Lovren being in that position, and then what happened afterwards? So could we have minimized his mistake? Yes, he might have. He should have done something differently. Maybe not been so tight on the striker, Dini, for example. Then, but what
mhm,
happened before and what happened after? So who allowed that ball to come all the way like 70 yards in the
yeah,
air? We have stopped that play over there. Once Lovren lost that header, what happened? How did the other players react? Right. So that's what he does. He just, like, minimizes that individual. Like, he will maybe, I don't know what he does in the backdrop, like, in terms of addressing minimum these mistakes. I think he's a very pragmatic coach, right? He understands, like, Lovren is Lovren, right? Like, you're not gonna get him to play like Van Dijk, right? So he tries to get the max out of him, and he will address it in time. I don't think Lovren is gonna last like 4 seasons at Liverpool, right? But Klopp, in the moment, like you said, like, he's got what he's got, and he's gonna work with that. He doesn't, like, he's not gonna, like, start cribbing about it that, oh, because of Lovren we lost the game and we could have done better. He's just going to talk about the unit and say, as a team we didn't play well. So what it does in essence is, and you guys are coaches, you would understand, it pushes other players to think that, stop blaming each other. If someone's made a mistake, you cover up. If you haven't covered up, you're part of that mistake. You could have done something, right?
yeah,
Which is a
absolutely.
really, like, good way of managing a team, because other people can always, like, we've played football, right? Like, and we've had these moments in our team where you think that, okay, someone made a mistake, and like, let's say, not an absolute howler where you couldn't have done anything, but in most mistakes there could be something that someone could have done to try and prevent it, right? So and that's what he's tried to put in, like, where people don't blame each other. They say we all are human, we all make mistakes. Some are better at managing them, some aren't. But let's, as a unit, try and win. And that's what, like, because winning, he knows that if you keep winning, all these things kind of go under the radar. Like, people don't really care if you won the game or if you won 20 games and just lost one because of that. People won't say stuff.
Yeah. Hamza, if
Yeah.
you were Klopp right now, you wish, but if you were Klopp right now, going into next season, what would you change in the squad in terms of personnel or in terms of tactics? What are some of the changes you would make?
Man, so I think that not I don't think that you have to change a lot in terms of personnel. I think we've got a good unit. Of course, I think that I would love to get, like, an attacking midfielder, maybe a creative midfielder, I would say, because I know that Genie's contract is still kind of up in the air. I would love to keep him. Definitely, I think he adds a lot of value. But we need like someone. I wouldn't say like we don't need to bring Coutinho back, but we need like someone like Coutinho. And Keita was supposed to be that person, but Keita really, unfortunately, hasn't kicked off. Right? Like he's got injuries. He's plagued by injuries. He keeps coming in, plays a couple of games, plays well, and then he kind of gets injured. And when with players like that have been there for 2 seasons and you can tell that they're not going to be there, then you need to replace them, or I mean at least bring in someone who can do that. And Ox has also like kind of not really kicked on to be that player yet, right? So you need an experienced player in midfield so that there are teams that like defend deep. Like to open them up, you need a player like Coutinho who could like create something out of nothing, right? And Keita hasn't really stepped up.
Hamza, in the last few months before COVID, we saw Oxlade doing really well. I mean, I think his games to goals ratio was very good. By the way he played against Atletico Madrid was sensational, And I think Klopp is somebody who will persist with him and persist with Keita. I see your point, but don't you think he should give Ox and Keita a bit more time, or would you transfer them out and get a replacement, or how would it work?
And good question. So I think knowing how Klopp is, I think he will persist with them. I think he might give Keita another season and see how it plays out. If Keita this season also is injured or does not really step up, then he might. I think Ox definitely he'll keep. The only thing I think Klopp is a bit wary of Ox on the defensive side. I think that's what he gives. He gives him a lot of stick because he feels like Ox is still not up to speed with how he wants him to play in the setup, like with the 4-3-3, right? Like he feels Ox is not as disciplined as maybe some of the other midfielders. And Klopp is a big fan of like the midfield three to be very well drilled in terms of discipline, in terms of covering space and breaking play up, right? That's like the classic Klopp's gegenpressing. If that one piece is not playing properly, then the entire game kind of opens up, right? So you're absolutely right. Like Ox, I think Ox he will persist with. He will give him time, but I feel Ox is still kind of in the making. He's not like the perfect product yet, that perfect Klopp product, and that's why you notice Klopp doesn't like play him day in day out. And he would with a lot of teams he goes with the experience with Milner and Henderson being there. But Milner again, like Milner will with each passing season you would need a replacement to come in who could play that role or again the squad. So I would just think like maybe one creative midfielder would be great, and definitely a centre back, right? I would think that Lovren should go, and maybe we should get another centre back because Matip again is very prone to injuries, and you just have Joe Gomez and Van Dijk. So you need every team has four central defenders, right?
Yeah.
So definitely get at least one, and Matip could be the other, and then maybe definitely a good second keeper, man. I mean, people think that this guy is pretty decent, but I don't know, man. I mean, when Alisson goes, like, I mean, the keeping standard like drops significantly. I don't know what it is with the second keepers at Liverpool, but it's really bad. Look at Bravo at Man City. He's as good as any other keeper, right? But as soon as we dip into our second keepers or third keepers, it's really bad. So I definitely get a good.
Don't you think cover for Robertson left back?
Yeah, so I think Klopp right now has been like okay because he feels like he can play Milner in that position. He could even like really push comes to shove, like kind of put Trent on the left and play someone on the right. I think Klopp does believe in all this like kind of being able to play players in different positions if need be, right? But if you're being very like kind of if I have like absolute freedom, then I would bring a cover for left back, but I would also bring a cover for the front three, right? We still haven't. I mean, Origi really hasn't been the sort of player that can like you could sit Salah or Mane out for 2-3 games and let Origi play. I think he's a good player, but Origi is like the what's his name, the Man U manager, right? He's like the offer, or he's the player who can just Ole, right? So he's a great impact player, like where you can bring him off the bench and he'll score these 2-3 crazy goals out of nowhere, like against Barca or in against Tottenham. But I don't think he's a player who can. At least for me, like right now, like at the level that Liverpool's playing at, I think he's struggling to match that level, kind of coming in and playing.
So, yeah, based on the goals he scored, based on the goals he scored, I think there should be a statue of Divock outside the stadium.
Talk about the important goals that he scored. Honestly, well, unbelievable. Like of all people, he's gotten them.
Yeah, Hamza, Mr. Jordan Henderson. Mr. Jordan Henderson, for me personally, I've loved him for a long time. I really rate him, but he always seems to receive criticism and hasn't really been valued by England fans or Liverpool fans. What's your view on Jordan, and how do you rate him?
Man, so I think I'm definitely I tilt on the side of being a bit overly
Critical.
critical of Henderson, and I'll tell you why. I think people um, I think people rate him based on, I mean, obviously, like him being a very hard worker, like he'll run all day and he'll work really hard. But what I tell people is like, and then there's certain games where if you notice, people will say, oh, look, Henderson played really well this game, and then Henderson played really well this game. But there's no consistency. There are games where Henderson will make mistakes, like, and for a team like Liverpool that is aspiring to be number one, beat the likes of Man City, you just do a comparison of the midfield that Man City has, or even Man U, for example. Look at the quality that they have versus, like, look at the caliber of players. Let's just stick to Jordan Henderson. My question is, would Jordan Henderson break into any of the top four midfield? The answer is
Certainly
no.
not. Certainly not in Man United team.
Well, wouldn't in Man City, wouldn't probably in Arsenal, wouldn't probably in Chelsea. I mean, that's what my argument is. Like he's a great like player in the sense that he's a good captain. He leads by example. He'll run all day, whatever. But I just feel like, and he's a good human being, right? Don't get me wrong. But I'm just saying, like purely from a football perspective, like, are you telling me that you can't find as fit players? Like, what does Jordan give you? Like running around all around the pitch. Sometimes, like when he actually came in, the people told him that he had to run less, right? He has to run more, like sort of strategically, as opposed to just run around, right? It's not about fitness, right? So it's football is very the tactics come in, and Jordan. There's so many times like you would vividly remember, where the pass was going lateral, where he could have played that ball. Like look at I'm not saying like, okay, De Bruyne is one of a kind in the world, but dude, there's so many times that I kid you not, you and I could be sitting there and say, I could have done that. Like, I could have just like literally picked that pass out, right? And maybe we're being overly critical, and it's easy for us to say, but if you get those, like too many of those moments, you feel like he's just about an average midfielder and who can run a lot. But you can find so many players who can run a lot, but also like do a lot more, like in midfield, right?
Yeah, but Hami, with that logic, if you look at Milner, Wijnaldum, how many teams will Milner and Wijnaldum get into in the top four leagues?